Welcome to the Blue Dwarf Keeping Children Safe Online. I am Paula, your host. I am a dedicated cybersecurity professional with a passion for OSINT and digital forensics. This podcast is a safe, supportive space where we share real-world tips to help parents, carers, and teachers protect children in today's digital world. No fear, just practical advice and empowering insights to help you feel more confident navigating online safety. Disclaimer. This episode contains discussion of child sexual abuse, online grooming, and other forms of harm involving children. Some listeners may find these topics distressing or triggering. Our conversation is for educational and awareness purposes only. It is not legal advice, psychological counseling, or a substitute for professional support. We will talk about patterns of harmful behavior and how to recognize warning signs to help protect children. We will not be sharing detailed examples, specific code words, or hashtags used by offenders, as this information can be misused. If you are a parent, educator, or a young listener, and you feel affected by what you hear, please reach out to a trusted professional or local support service in your country. If you believe a child is in immediate danger, please contact emergency services or your National Child Protection Hotline right away. By continuing to listen, you acknowledge that you understand this and choose to proceed. Hello, everyone. Today we are joined by Stephanie von Bismarck, a leader in digital education, founder of the How Do We Manage platform, and someone who is deeply committed to helping families navigate the complexity of tech, parenting, and online safety. Stephanie, it's good to have you here. Thank you for joining us. And for the listener who don't know you or they met you for the first time, what's your story and how did digital education and tech safety become your focus?
Dear Paula, thank you so much for having me today. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here and talk about these important topics with you. Back to your question, where did this all start? It started about a little over than 20 years ago, I'd say, where I by accident was introduced through the International Red Cross into the horrendous crimes that happen online on sexual abuse of children, child pornography, human trafficking, all these kind of things. I helped build up a big NGO at that time, internationally working, but I was dealing mainly with the German-speaking market. And we fought for many, many years against all these crimes against children and women. And you can imagine this was over 20 years ago, or yeah, it was only over 20 years ago. So it was in the early days of the internet, or the earlier days of the mass internet, but it was already starting to generate horrific numbers to ease up the distribution of child sexual abuse material worldwide. I would say it is a gateway to hell. With that being said, I'm not an apocalyptic person. I don't doom technology at all. I'm pro tech. I'm always curious and what is new and comes around. But it's all about understanding what dangers are around us and actually facing them. And then it's a long time. I've written books. I hold speeches. I write articles on a constant basis. I'm also an entrepreneur on the side, and I also now, since not such a long time ago, I host a podcast, and it's building up to a platform. It's called How Do We Manage? It's all about finding balance in this very, very fast-paced world where we, as humans, have to ask ourselves, what do we have to do? Where do we have to sort of do things or change things in order to remain human and to have a balanced life, where technology helps us, but it doesn't harm us. So
That's a
that's a very short And well, it wasn't that short, but it's still, I'm trying to be as short as possible.
20 years of a background, it's hard to shrink it in a few sentences. So thank
Yeah.
you for the background. I do have a tough questions for you from the beginning. So when we talk about individual creating or sharing CSAM or child sexual abuse material, what does research or frontline experience tell us about the psychology behind this? So this is not to excuse the behavior, but to understand it.
Well, first of all, one has to understand that there are obviously multiple factors, but because there's also the factor that you have teenagers, for example, exploring their own sexuality, and as everyone has phones and cameras around them, taking pictures of that is also part of a comparably natural process within teenage years. Now it's just come in, and then they have a first, boyfriend, girlfriend, however you want to, name it, and eventually sharing pictures of sexual content might be a normal and not at first a harmful thing. It gets harmful because if it's all of a sudden used against them, so if anything goes wrong, these pictures are circulating into the internet and you can never take them back. And of course, if you or they are depicting minors, although they're the minor themselves, they become guilty of producing child sexual abuse material. So that is one thing one shouldn't forget. That's a big topic in itself, right? But I think your question was a little bit different, especially for those, and we're talking adults in this case, who are those who are producing child sexual abuse material. There are many factors. Some of them are just psychological. Many offenders experience difficulties with emotional regulation, loneliness, and have problems solving healthy relationships or adult relationships. Some have pretty distorted sexual behaviors, while others just have distorted beliefs that justify or minimize the harm of their actions. Then they have cognitive distortions. They just sometimes have, hold really maladaptive beliefs, such as seeing children as willing participants. So they're making it harmless or rationalizing the abuse, or minimizing its impact on children, or even going as far as saying, well, these children are they want this, they're sexually aroused because they're also taking into account that if you're a little older, if you're, for example, a teenager, sexual arousal can happen just because it's a bodily reaction. And if something like that happens, an offender would tell them, well, this is what you wanted, look at you, um, and this thinking allows them to persist in harmful behavior without experience the guilt or the shame that other people would have around it. Um, and then they very often have intimacy and relationship deficits. So they struggle with low self-esteem, social isolation, have trouble with assertiveness or building trust, leading, to seek that often leads that they seek control over something else, and often it's in this case someone who's apparently less powerful than them, and in this case often it's a child or a minor of some sort.
Someone,
um
someone who they can control.
yes, and then of course you also have those who are just sexually aroused by children's bodies, pedophiles. These terms often get mixed up because if you look at 100% of those who are convicted for these kind of crimes to jail, only 1/3 of them are so-called pedophiles. This is a disturbance, a distortion of that these people will only be sexually aroused by a children's body. And 2/3, though, who are convicted to jail are other offenders which I just mentioned, such as, they're seek it's a power game. It's the sexual abuse is becomes a weapon. And it's, other people would take a knife to harm someone. In this case, the sexual abuse becomes the knife.
Heard about that too. I have 10,000 questions right now. None of them can be asked here, unfortunately. But before I go to the next question, you mentioned something very interesting, and I would like to ask for clarification. You said that even though you're a child, you can still be guilty of producing sexual material.
Mhm.
What age this law become enforceable on a child?
That's a little bit that's a good question, because it's a little bit different from country to country. And this is by the way, these are topics. We're not only talking about sexual abuse material that is produced, so that means you're in possession or in production of child pornography, and there are various age ranges in different countries. But that, for example, also comes around the fact that we see recruiting of very young children or very young adults for other crimes, such assassinations. And if I know you've heard of this. This has happened, for example, in Scandinavia, where organized crime are grooming children to commit other crimes, mainly because if they get caught, there's hardly any rules and regulations in place. Sweden, for example, is about to change these laws, so then they can really get punished much, much earlier. So it's about different countries with different laws. So there's not one answer. But theoretically, you should obviously look at what is happening out there and how young are the people. And in children's case, often with production of pornography and the possession of pornography, many of them, to say it sort of positively, are not aware that this is illegal. Many of them, if they're sharing it amongst their boyfriends, and if this is only for private use, they're not even aware this is illegal content. So that's where the educational part comes in so very importantly.
So for every child out there, be aware what you're doing with your naked pictures.
Exactly.
My next question is, there's a lot of talk about digital grooming, and this term is used quite a lot. But what does that actually look like in 2025? How subtle it can be and how early it can start? But most of all, can you explain what exactly it is?
But grooming is something that it can literally happen on any platform where there's any communication possible, right? So that can be a chat in a video game. That can be, of course, on social media. That can be on certain platforms, websites, wherever there is a way to communicate. That's where grooming can happen. And grooming is often you can imagine it like building up a relationship, because abuse and those who abuse children later on, it just never, or very, very rarely, just starts as an abuse from now to the next second, right? So this is all about building relationships. This is all about building trust. And so these people will go into these chat rooms of various sorts and start, either they're posing as a peer or a very sympathetic adult, and they're offering attention, gifts, emotional support. That works very well with kids that are somehow isolated, are growing up in very difficult circumstances, don't have a lot of supervision, because they're targeting someone who can easily be made a victim. And that is when you're somehow alone, when you feel not understood, and when you're sort of isolated, then you're vulnerable for that kind of attention. So that will be someone that just gives you a lot of attention in a time where you are longing for it, and there is really no one who's actually protected against it, because we all have periods in our lives where we are more vulnerable than others. Might it be that something happens at home that is difficult, or you name it, there are various reasons. But then sort of they build that trust, that relationship. Sometimes it even goes over grooming the parents. It's not always grooming directly. Now we're talking digital, so mostly then it's directly, but sometimes it's also grooming the parents. They were from the nice neighbor to the offering babysitting and all of it. It's all about building a trust relationship until quite some steps later, they start, introducing other kind of behavior and, making requests to keep secrets and, and isolating the child from others and introducing lies and all sorts of things.
I was thinking while you were talking, I was thinking that in the second episode of this podcast, we had Harrison. I was thinking what's his name. Sorry, Harrison. We had Harrison, and he said something very interesting. He said, the person who groomed me, it was my friend for 1 year and a half. We was doing math homework together. We were sharing things. So it wasn't someone spooky.
No, not necessarily. I mean, it can be because sometimes they also pretend to be someone else than they actually are, right? But these people, they don't only get a kick out of, an abuse in the end. They also get a kick out of luring you in, and gaining your trust and even gaining the trust of your surrounding and all of it. That's part of that very, very, very horrendous game these people are playing.
Do you think we are doing enough to educate children about healthy boundaries online before predators can actually exploit that gap?
I don't think so. No, because the numbers, quite frankly, are just rising and soaring. And yes, the development in technology is insanely fast, so we're having a tough time to keep up in general. But it's definitely such that I even wrote it down somewhere. Like just in the first half of 2025, and with numbers, it's very, very tough because there's so much happening in the dark, on the dark web and the dark side. So sometimes it's very hard to actually put numbers down to something. But there in the first half of 2025, 2 million CSAM, so child sexual abuse material filed reports, were filed across Europe for the first half in 25, with a significant increase in highly realistic and violent AI generated material. That's just one little thing, right? And there are about 3 million registered accounts for the most worldwide for the most horrific abuse platforms that are out there. So and then you can imagine this is a web that is just everywhere.
In your
To back to the question, I'm sorry, it's like no, we're not doing enough, because even if you educate children technologically, so if they're knowing how to use the devices and stuff, it is a lot more. It's a lot more holistic. It's about empathy. It's about treating others. It's about understanding how people work and are and behave online. And it's not only about the tools, because technology in itself is morally neutral. It's the people who are using it and those kind of behaviors that we need to teach.
in your opinion, what is the right age to start a conversation like this with a child?
Well, I think any age where you start introducing digital technology, right? And I would argue that apart from an occasional movie and also some FaceTime with family and friends across the globe and stuff, or some very, very age appropriate game for a very, very limited time, uh, children under 6 years old don't need access to a lot of digital devices whatsoever. But the reality is different. The reality shows that many 3 to 4 year olds already have access in some way or form, much more than I would like to see it. And it's exactly then when you have to start introducing conversations. And of course, in the beginning, you won't be talking about horrendous things. It's more about, think about it like trying to ride the bike or something. You'll start slow and you'll do it over and over again, and you have very restricted sort of games and access, and you'll talk about how it is when you meet others and how you it's a lot of things that I would hope that parents and most parents also do, is teach them how to behave when they meet other people, and how to be kind to each other, and how to respect each other's boundaries, and this kind of things, and that these kind of rules also apply when they move around in the digital space. And just because you're meeting someone there doesn't mean that they're naturally a nice person. You always have to ask and be open in your communication and conversations around it. So, however old they are, when you introduce digital media to your children, you have to start opening the conversation about dangers. Yeah, that's as easy as it is.
Staying on this topic and the area, from a parent perspective or a teacher's perspective, what are some behavioral signs that a child might be entering a grooming process, even if the child is not aware of it, or the parent is not aware of it? Are there any signs to recognize that he or she might be groomed?
Well, it's this is a tough one because certain sort of behaviors can lead to or have other reasons as well. But it's especially when people are starting, or children becoming very secretive. If you're understanding all of a sudden that they seem to have apps that you don't haven't really seen before, which is why it's so important that you know what kind of apps your children have on their phones. It's like if they isolate themselves, if they talk less to you, or if they all of a sudden would talking a lot about a friend that they met online. It's sometimes children are, they're just gullible, and they would even tell their parents, "Oh, I've met this person, and it's so nice, and I'm having such a good time, and we're only playing video games." This is this moment where teachers and parents alike should be, at least listening closely, because as much as this might be harmless, it doesn't have to be always harmless. And if especially if you see um, changes in behavior that are not normal to that child, if something has shifted, if something has changed to what you've seen before, then there's always reason to ask, is there something that we're missing? Is there something that's going on where he or she are too ashamed or too afraid, or however, already coerced from a perpetrator, not to talk? And that's when you just have to be really alert with like the antennas out there.
How much shame or secrecy plays into a predator's strategy, and how can we counteract that as adults to keep communication open with the child?
Well, shame and secrecy is one of the key components, because they will always, first of all, secrecy. I'll give you an example. Is like that's how sometimes perpetrators work with. Okay, if you don't send me a picture now, your mother is going to be really, really sick. Or they're going to use these kind of threats where that child is going to be really afraid, and then they send the pictures, and then that entire thing starts. It's like, well, need to send me more, otherwise I'm going to send the pictures that you sent me to your mother, and that's going to really upset them. So there's these kind of secrets. They're based on shame, because that child or the young adult or the teenager is already shamed that they did something. They don't know how to get out of it, and the perpetrator is using exactly that kind of strategy, which is why, for example, we ran programs in schools with little children where we just taught them the difference between a good and a bad secret. What is a good secret? A good secret is what is mom or dad or getting for his or her birthday present. That's a secret that we can keep, and it makes us feel good. So that's one example of a good secret. It's like, but if someone tells you, if you don't do, you can't tell this, otherwise, your mom and dad, something horrible is going to happen. They're going to have an accident, something. So you have to keep this a secret. So if a child understands that secrets are supposed to make you feel good and not very bad, and if there's a secret that makes you feel very bad, you're not someone who's trading on someone if you seek help and ask for advice. It's a very simple little like exercise that works wonders in the world against this kind of crime.
That's a very good advice. Thank you. Um, Staying in the school area, is there a role for digital literacy curriculum in schools to include real age appropriate conversation about grooming tactics?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It has to be part of it because unfortunately, as I mentioned before, that's the dark side of all the technology we're facing and using all day long. And there are people who are abusing they're working from the shadows and they're abusing all of that. And the more we are shying away of addressing these kind of behaviors and strategies and tactics from these kind of people, by the way, it's also a multi-billion-dollar business, the more easy of a playground we're creating it for them. So yes, this is a definite for any conversation. It has to be included in a digital literacy curriculum. It has to be around open communications and building trust from from a positive perspective towards yeah with children and young adults.
In your work, what are the biggest misconceptions parents have about how children use technology today?
Well, that's a good one because, that's an interesting one because some parents do think it's all safe. If so, first of all, um, they think that parents' controls are foolproof.
No,
They have all these yeah, exactly. So you would know that more than anyone, and I know that also because I've been working with a lot of young kids and children, and they are extremely creative and extremely good in finding ways around all sorts of control. By the way, it's also quite a challenge. So, no, parental controls are not foolproof, number one. Um, Number two, my child is safe if he or she is not using social media.
mm-hmm.
Not true. Because all these kind of things are not happening only on social media. They're happening on in video chats. They're happening on communication tools, just as WhatsApp and others. So there's so much more, many more platforms out there than social media where these kind of things can happen. Third, there are some out there that say all screen time is bad. That's also not true, right? Not all screen time is bad. Some screen time is great. It's if it's used for creativity, if it's used for learning, if it's used to, to create something. There's or even communicate with friends and family. Then it's positive. This is not. It's not all bad. So I think this is an important way to important thing to say. And also, you can't deny that this is the reality of our younger generations. This is how they communicate with each other. This is how they interact. So taking that away from them will isolate a singular person, and that's not what you want.
No,
Um,
that go.
fourth would be like kids can set their own limits. Hell no, they can't. It's like their children's brains are still developing. They're having their brains just from a biological and developmental aspect are struggling with setting limits and they're just learning. They need us adults to set the boundaries, to set the guardrails in order to protect them and to create a space where they can safely develop and learn. They're not yet capable or in the way of understanding how to set their own limits. So they need us desperately. Um, yeah. Fifth, another one is tech use is only about fun and distraction. No, that's also not true. We just mentioned it. It's just it can be very useful and educational and proactive and productive. It's not all just fun and silly stuff. Um, I guess some people would think that cyberbullying is the only concern. And that's, as we already talked about it earlier, definitely whereas it's very serious, it's a very serious thing, it's obviously not the only harm that's waiting out there.
Unfortunately, yes. Without shaming any platform, or if you don't like, don't name any of them. But what are specific platforms, tool, or content types that parents often overlook, but they are high risk for grooming or exploitation?
Well, I'd say anything that's encrypted messaging,
Yeah.
or even the disappearing messages.
Mhm.
That's a tricky one. You know, gaming features or gaming platform with chat features are just really dangerous, because anyone can go on there. An interesting one would be, for example, dating apps, like where they can just communicate. Sometimes it goes as far that they would the perpetrators would try and find single parents, and the actual target is a child. So, that then comes a little over the parents, right? So a dating app would be something like that. Open social media with minimal moderation, anything like that, or user-generated platforms. And that's why it's so important. So user-generated platforms where you can upload pictures and files, and it's just, from user to user. That's where you can hide pictures and movies and stuff with little to no detection of from the outside, especially if that young person is somehow unsupervised. So yeah, that's why it's so very, very important to have a very open dialogue about, what apps are on those phones, and are there any apps or any applications that you don't recognize, and then you have to look into it.
Okay, that's very interesting, especially with the dating app. I had a
Yeah.
different idea in mind, but you gave me a different point of view to look at it. I have
Well, what is your idea towards it?
I was thinking that it was, I think, last year or 2 years ago, one of the most high, I think one of the highest crime was I forgot the name, the official name of it, when they try to make the victim fall in love with them and then send them money. So
Yeah,
that,
like romance fraud.
yes.
Yeah, 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 yeah. But I'm always talking more from a child and youth perspective. Um, yes, I was mentioning the dating apps, so when they're slightly older. The scamming, the love, the romance fraud, when money gets involved, normally you have older, adults involved. And yes, definitely it can happen to adults as well. And then romance fraud is one of those things. Yeah.
Yeah, but as I said, you gave me a different angle to look at that app.
Hmm.
Probably just like me, many millions of mom wouldn't look at a dating app as a possible harm for their children.
Yeah.
So you brought a different light on it. Now we are not saying that dating apps are bad. Just make sure that the person you're meeting there has the best intention.
Yes.
I want to play a game with you.
Okay.
Um, let's pretend I am a mother and I have a beautiful daughter. I take her to ballet, I take her to the gym, and then probably I take her to the beach. And because
Hmm.
I'm a proud mother, I obviously take pictures of my daughter and put them online. How do you see this kind of behavior? And or what would your advice be to me to pay attention to the details? Probably.
Well, you see, I come from a child protection angle. So, as much as I understand a mother's pride and that you want to, show to the world what great achievements your child is having and all of that. You just have to understand that there are people out there with very, very bad intentions seeing children's pictures, especially when it comes to certain things where, a body is portrayed in a way that can be used or misinterpreted in a sexual way. So, you look at ballet, they're having very tight stockings and you see very close up, how the bodies look. Same with the beach and same with, I don't know, swimming and all of it. So, as much as I understand that, you want to share content and share, also the progress perhaps of your child, you have to evaluate with yourself and your family or whoever you're talking to is like, how much of that do you want to share? Because first and foremost, it can be used and copied and abused from just anyone over the internet. So the harshest privacy settings is for me a bare minimum. I have a hard time understanding, and those are unfortunately out there who literally use these kind of pictures for the literally the promotion of their children. In the end, it's sort of something that it's a self-interest because they're getting attention. But the kind of attention they might be getting, and thus the child might be getting, might be an attention that you really, really, really want to avoid. I know this is sort of a bummer and a downer, because no one likes to hear these kind of things, but I've seen it. I've had contact with a lot of people who were victims of these kind of crimes, and believe me, this is horrendous. And I also have another take on it. I always, the world is always talking about own privacy rights, and that the privacy right of a picture is your own and all these kind of things. But, you have to be mindful of the privacy rights of your child. Yes, you're the guardian of that, but think about it. Perhaps at some point, your child never wanted you to post or share any pictures of them out there. So if you really want to be, you know, 100% straight with this privacy conversation, you have to start supporting and valuing the privacy rights of a child as well. And until they're not grown and they don't give consent, well, you have to be very mindful. So it's another take on what I have. I'm always shocked what people are doing, quite frankly.
I had a conversation about child rights. I had a conversation with a lawyer, and he said to me, well, the case was that I was studying something, and I asked him, how can I do, especially when it involves children, how can I do it in a legal way that it will not bite me and then obviously put everyone in danger? And he said to me something that stayed with me. He said like this: be careful what you're doing, because you are talking with the parents, that they are guardians. But when that child grows, it might sue them for giving you the permission to do a background check.
Mhm.
I was like, I never think of that.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was like, this is very legal and this is very possible. So whatever you're doing, you either stay away or make sure that that child cannot come back to you or to their parents when they grow.
Yeah.
So what you said, it makes perfect sense. Make sure that your child agrees. And obviously, since he's a child, I don't know how much consent he can give. My next question is how we can move past fear-based messaging and towards empowering parents and kids with real-world strategies.
Mm. I mean, one thing that I'm never tired, and it sounds so profane, and it's just promoting open communication. Any problem in the world, by the way, it doesn't have to be the ones we're just talking about right now, By shying away, by looking away, by running away, they will not become less and they will not go away. So to be aware of the dangers, to have an open dialogue, to as parents or caregivers even admit that you don't know everything, which is perfectly fine because none of us grew up fully with it. The speed of the development is so fast that we barely keep up. It's like to sit down and have open communications about what's happening on the net, who is out there, what are the dangers, like inform yourself and then get into an open communication and start building trust with your children, right? And then I think this is where it leads me to the next point where education goes over restriction because if you if you prohibit everything what they're doing, you're first of all those young people, they were just find a way around it. And if something bad happens, you are not the first person they're going to go to because they learned from you that you don't allow anything. You're going to get mad. They're afraid of that. So you won't be their go-to person. And quite frankly, in a healthy understanding of a good parent and a good caregiver, you should be the first go-to person if something is going wrong, right? So that's why I think education goes over restrictions. I think, positive digital citizenship is just so very important. It just teaches all these skills that we need to teach, including the soft skills that we need to emphasize on, from empathy and communication skills and critical thinking, to understand, to learn how to identify fake news, all of these kind of things. That's all positive digital citizenship. How to behave towards others, how to act when you see something is happening, how to seek help. All these kind of things are part of that. Um, I'm a big fan of sort of collaborative boundaries, meaning you are getting into a dialogue with your child and you sit down together and create boundaries. Because if you take children and young adults serious, then they will feel more responsibility and they will sort of open up and they have your attention and they will try to work with you instead of against you. So come up and, discuss the platforms, discuss the apps. Why are you using them? How long? What makes sense? Because in my experience, the young people are not as dumb as they are sometimes portrayed. They want to learn, they want to know what's dangerous. And more often than not, I've worked with young people who said, or quite frankly, it's you who left us alone. It's like we aren't born with all this knowledge, but we have nowhere to go to. It's like, where are you when we need you? It's like, how do you think that we're gonna like have an infusion and have all the knowledge in the world about all these dangers just because we were digital natives and you were not? Or and that's such an important thing to remember. And I think guidance is, and it goes a little bit in hand with what I already said. It's guide, don't just guard.
Yeah.
You have to ask yourself, what kind of role model am I? Am I sitting in front of the screen all day long? If I'm doom scrolling, if I have the phone at the dinner table, if I'm having, all of this, I have literally no say towards my children and young people around me because they won't believe me. It's your actions that count, not the words.
That's true. In your opinion, what does a strong digital hygiene routine for a child or teen look like, especially in a family who don't want to rely on full-time surveillance?
What I think very important is device-free zones and and times. By the way, there's just certain times that you can come up together where there's just no digital use, and that is very important. For example, at bedtime and in the sleeping room, and sleep is such an important factor for developing brains and bodies. So you really have to create spaces where they can sleep undisturbed, um, which is why this is so important. The same, of course, applies for learning, creating safe learning environments where they can really focus and learn. I think, that goes hand in hand with a balanced screen time. You just have to, look at, are they having hobbies? Are they doing outside some extracurricular activities? Do they have friends? Which all of this will naturally, because we're humans and wired for connection and belonging, will naturally keep them more away from a screen. So if that is in a healthy balance, sitting at an app for sometimes in a half an hour or 45 minutes, that's not going to be the harmful component in your life. You really have to be looking at the balance. If privacy and security routines. And if you don't know much about it yourself as a caregiver or parent, then seek help, go online, try and understand what safety measures you can learn about and also then apply. Um, yeah, and respect of others and self-care is, as stupid as that sounds, is very important.
It's
And
not
family agreements, you come up with certain rules within your family, and everyone has to apply to them, it, including yourself, of course, first and foremost.
because you're the example in the family.
Absolutely.
Speaking of examples, do you have or can you share an example where a conversation, not a rule, made the biggest difference in a child's digital safety?
And it's an interesting. I have a few, but this one is shocking because it circled back to me. I don't know, probably 2 years later. We ran a program in primary schools, and there was about safety and strangers and all of things. And this was more like a analog kind of scenario, but we were teaching them about all these kind of things that can happen, and that kid was groomed outside of school a couple of days in a row from someone with puppies. I mean, it's really picture book, right? With puppies. And that man then said, well, he had what, one or two puppies, but there is more where I am. Do you want to come? And that child went with him, that boy. And of course, no need to mention it. At home, there were no two puppies. He sort of locked the room, and he started showing, I don't know, some explicit content on the TV.
Well,
And the boy, who was, I think, 10 or something, started screaming and saying, what is this going to be? Is this going to be sexual abuse? He told us to police later. He managed to run out and ran on the street and screamed for help, and someone helped him. And he then later reverted it back to the program that we've run in school.
you cannot see it. I have goosebumps. Seriously, I do.
And this, up until today, is one of those where I thought, like, okay, wow. And he would later just explain to the police that, apparently also that guy, he was so astonished or shocked by that child's reaction and that self-confidence, that he sort of it sort of stopped. He didn't have, he didn't even react in a way to trying to hinder the child. And that is such a strong example, of that you can really, really do a lot of good with proper education and information around things.
It is a strong example. For parents who feel like they're too late, like their child's already deeply online, what's the first step you recommend for them to take?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I don't think there's ever too late. It might seem or feel too late for you, but I think there's no such thing as too late. And I think the first thing I would try and recommend is establish some sort of communication. And that the most important thing about this has to be with curiosity and not with blame. Because you don't want this young child or young adult or however old that person might be to shut off. You want to start engaging in a conversation. And with any shown interest, without any blame or any criticism, you will have a better path into establishing something that where you can regain trust a little bit. And I know it sounds, and that's not always easy, but this what I, would always try. And then it's sometimes it start like being interested if it's video games, for example. Start interesting yourself for that video game, asking if you could also start playing, you would like to learn. That kind of interest signalizes the child that, oh, my mom, my dad is all of a sudden, what's happening? He or she is interested. And it wasn't about me blaming me or being angry with me. It's like really start showing interest or try to be willing and learn in the beginning, because it's later when that little bit of trust and a little bit of more openness is when you start having more conversations and deeper conversations. But the most important thing is no blame. And if you're really, really worried that something horrendous is happening or something really bad is happening, please seek help online, seek help at various, NGOs, institutions, or, I don't know, the school might have some sort of like a child psychologist or anything. So don't think you have to deal with it all on your own if you don't know how to react in the next step.
Thank you. With everything you've seen and everything you've done in your career path until today, what still gives you hope?
Up until today, and since ever, proper education gives me hope.
That's
Because
nice.
I've seen how much good you can do if you just have the right education and the right information with as many people as possible. Because most people out there are still good, and they are willing to protect their children, and they're willing to protect others. And the more information they have around what's happening, the the more good we will see, and the better we will, protect ourselves and others. That really makes me hopeful.
Is there one mindset shift you hope parents take from your work, and what would it be?
I think I would hope is that you um, stay open-minded. Don't don't limit your thinking. Don't restrict yourself or condemn things or others just because they might be new or different than when you grew up. And be dare to admit that you don't have to know everything, and that it's okay to seek help and advice, and that doesn't make you worse a bad parent, not at all. On the contrary, I'd say. And I think if we can reach a little bit of that that's a big step forward.
And I have one last question, and I promise I'll let you go. For the listeners who want to take action today,
Mm.
whether at home, in school, or in policy circles, where do they begin?
With themselves.
Okay.
I would say you start with yourself. What is my behavior? What is my online behavior? What are my security settings? What am I doing? And am I doing things right or wrong? Start informing yourself. And then if you've applied that, then you can, it's a little bit like in the airplane when the oxygen mask comes. It's like, first of all, you're supposed to put the oxygen mask on your own face, and then you help the others. And I'd say this is what I would ask of anyone who's listening. It's like, check your own online behavior and what you are having for sort of rules and values for your own life, for your privacy, for your safety, and then look around you, and who needs protection and who needs guidance. And there are a lot of young people who need a lot of guidance out there. Let me tell you.
Stephanie, I would like to thank you for grounding such a difficult topic in empathy, clarity, and practical action. It was a pleasure to have you with us, and I thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you so much for your very important work, and it's been a pleasure to be here.
Bye. To all our listeners, we hope this episode gave you insight and tools to help guide young people toward ethical digital path. Do not forget to subscribe and join us for more conversation that keep our online spaces secure. Stay safe, stay informed. Bye bye.